You're now listening to the Fantasy Filler Podcast, where we put you in the driver's seat every week, all year long. In the NASCAR racing world, from top news stories, latest results, and best fantasy lineups, we'll have you up to speed and out in front before the drop of the green flag. So let's dive in with our host, Vanilla Wafers.
It is Memorial Day weekend, which means it is now time for one of the biggest crown jewel events, the Coca Cola 600. Considered to many as the best weekend in motorsports racing, we will be talking about one of the longest races on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, as well as some top news stories that came out throughout the week, including a driver returning back to the Cup Series. All that plus more on today's episode of the Fantasy Filler Podcast. I hope you guys are ready for this weekend. I know I definitely am, as it's one of the biggest race weekends of the year. The Monaco Grand Prix, the Indianapolis 500, and then ending with the Coca-Cola 600. And since it's one of the most important weekends of the year, I figured I'd bring back a regular guest that we have seen multiple episodes. He is the host of the Motorsports Ministry Podcast. Of course, we're talking about Armani DePaul. How you doing today, Armani? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Fun to be back on the podcast again. It feels like I'm on almost, feel like we should be calling this co-host Armani at this point.
You know what? At this point, I agree with you. I'm just like, hey, I need a guest. Armani, are you free? And you're like, always, man. So we always have you on. So maybe I'll just make like a 4-window video, and whoever pops on just pops on, and we'll just have your name locked onto there. And if you don't show up, we'll just do a static screen from here on out. But are you super excited here for this weekend, for Memorial Day weekend, with the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indy 500, and of course the Coca-Cola 600?
Oh, I'm so excited. You got Monaco to start things off in the morning. The greatest spectacle in racing, the Indianapolis 500, then to end it off with a 600-mile endurance race at Charlotte. Oh boy, it's a racing fan's dream what's going to happen on Sunday.
Yeah, and hopefully we get all the races in, because there is some talk of weather coming in for the NASCAR Coca-Cola 600. I mean, who's really surprised by that? We've been dealing with weather all this week, or all this season, excuse me. It's been driving me crazy, but who knows? We've actually been pretty lucky, except for like 1 or 2 races, that we have been able to complete the race on the same day. So what do you think the odds are? The rain is about 60% chance precipitation throughout all of Sunday. Do you like those odds or not really?
I think with the race being held closer to nighttime, I think that's going to give us a better chance, at least in terms of an outlook, because the race is starting so much later. We'll probably hear some news as to whether the race is going to happen fairly early on.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think if I was NASCAR, I'm pretty sure we're going to have the answer by around 5 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the race. Because at that point, they're already starting to figure out for the Xfinity Series race, they're going to try to move it up an hour, because I guess there's also going to be weather in the area on Saturday. I'm having a hard time saying weather. I have no idea why. So maybe they'll do the same for the 600. Don't guarantee that, but who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe we'll be able to complete it. We have been in worse situations. I remember the Daytona 500 about a decade ago. It took like, what was it, almost 7 hours to complete the race. But by God, did they do it? It can happen once again here. Who knows? But let's be positive. Let's be positive, and let's just hope that the rain stays away and we can have ourselves a good action-packed race. As last year, this was hands down #1 race of the season. Absolutely loved it. And I'm hoping that we see something similar to what we saw at Kansas. It's nothing but action-packed, passing going around, and maybe some extra storylines going into the summer stretch. Now, of course, for today's episode, we're going to be talking about our top fantasy picks. Which drivers do you want to go with? Which drivers do you want to keep on the bench for this week? But before we do that, there's been some important news stories that have really popped up here this week. I think the biggest one we got to talk about is regarding Hendrick Motorsports and the driver in the number 48 car. As you guys are well aware, Alex Bowman has been out due to injury for the last few weeks. due to a sprint car incident. We've had Josh Berry, who is an Xfinity Series regular, take over for that car. He's done pretty decent. I wouldn't say it was the same level as the number 9 car, but still, for a substitute driver, it's been a really good performance. But now it looks like for the Coca Cola 600, he is cleared. He will be returning back to that number 48 car. Some people are excited, while some people are a little bit nervous. And Armani, talking before the show, you are kind of nervous just for the fact that this is the endurance race, the Coca Cola 600. Do we think Alex Bowman can complete the entire race? Or do we think we're going to have Josh Berry on the sideline and going to take over maybe halfway through or maybe the end of stage 1?
I think Bowman is going to complete the race. I don't think they would put him in if they didn't think that he could. He has made, discussions on how, he's worried about how, his back would feel, when he straps in or, when the jack comes down. So I imagine Barry is still going to be on standby, but I got to imagine that Bowman is going to complete the entire race.
Let's hope so. I mean, he was able to drive 170 laps in a NASCAR improved medical evaluation test at North Wilkesboro Speedway. Of course, that's not even close to the same distance. I think that's the equivalent to about maybe 150 miles at most, maybe even less than that, because I think North Wilkesboro is only 0.625. So, yeah, definitely a lot less than that. But they did like what they saw. And we were also worried about Chase Elliott coming back into the car because he returned at Martinsville, right? Was that where he returned? Okay, he went to Martinsville, and then he went to Talladega right on after. And he was completely fine. He said he had some concerns. Turns out there was no concerns at all when it was all said and done. Alex Bowman, he's kind of saying the same thing. But if Hendrick Motorsports is confident enough that Alex Bowman can be in the car here for the Coca Cola 600, then more than likely, I agree with you, he's going to be able to finish out the race. So for all you Alex Bowman fans, if Danny B. Talks was here, he's definitely the biggest Alex Bowman fan. Don't worry, because he is now back behind the wheel in that number 48 car. Let's hope he has a good weekend here at Charlotte. Some other bit of news, we have Project 91 getting some talks in again to be coming back for another Cup Series race, as they will be returning to the track at Chicago for the inaugural street course race. And they are going to have a pretty interesting driver that I did not think about at all, because I really don't know too much about this realm of racing. The Supercars champion, let's hope I don't butcher this, Shane Van Gisbergen. Is that how you say it, Armani? I have no idea. I believe
it's Shane Van Gisbergen, but I've heard it both ways.
Gisbergen. I like that a little bit more. There's going to be someone that's going to comment to me like, Mr. Vanilla Wafers, I've enjoyed your podcast until you butchered the Supercars champion's name. How dare you? I'll never listen again. It's happened once. It's actually happened once with Jacques Villeneuve. Apparently, that's how you pronounce it. And we said Jacques Villeneuve, and they were livid. Absolutely livid. I think it started with, "Dear Vanilla Wafers, how dare you?" So let's hope that doesn't happen again.
Vanilla Wafers.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah, they were so pissed. And I felt bad, but at the same time, I couldn't help but smirk at the situation, because it's just like, I never thought I would get that from mispronouncing someone's name slightly. Like, I was using an American accent for a gentleman that's located over on the other side of the world. But Supercars champion Shane Gisbergen, forget it. I'm giving up on this. Will be the driver for that number 91 machine at Chicago. Do you think this is a good move? Do you think he's going to do good in this race? Or do you think this is mostly a publicity stunt by NASCAR and Trackhouse Racing to get more people outside the sport into the sport?
I think he's going to have a better shot at competing than Kimi Räikkönen, simply just because supercars, they drive, just number one, the look and the way they drive is a lot more similar to a cup car. Kimi comes from F1, completely different from NASCAR. Supercars are way similar. In fact, I remember when the next gen was still in development, a lot of drivers said it was very similar to a supercar in terms of how it would drive. So I think this is a great hire. Shane Van Gisbergen, one of the top supercar drivers of all time, multiple-time champion, multiple wins under his belt. So I'm not going to say he's going to win, But I do think he's in the shot for a top 10, top 15.
Top 10, top 15. You know, a lot of people would say the Kimi Räikkönen comment would be very controversial, but you know what? I see where you're coming from. Definitely the supercars are a lot more familiar to NASCAR or similar to NASCAR than Formula One would be to NASCAR. So maybe you're right. Maybe he puts on himself a good finish, and this could be a very chaotic race. So maybe his goal is going to stay out of trouble. I remember Jenson Button in the number 15 machine for Circuit of the Americas. That was his main goal, to stay out of trouble. I think in the end, he had himself a really good finish. Kimi Räikkönen almost had himself a really good finish. So who knows what's going to happen here in this race? One thing is for certain, Project 91 will make a return back to the racetrack, and they will be at the Chicago Street Course. And the last bit of news that we wanted to cover on, this is more speculations, but it's starting to become more certain than it was a few weeks before, and that's regarding Josh Berry. We just talked about Josh Berry earlier and how he's been the substitute driver for Hendrick Motorsports. Well, now it looks like things are getting really, really close for him, signing a contract full-time to Racing Cup Racing. Who would that team be? That would be Stewart-Haas Racing, as he could be the driver replacing Kevin Harvick next season. Now, I'd say he's earned it. I say he's absolutely earned it. He's been putting up some really great results. Being a substitute driver is already as tough as it is. And at Richmond, being able to finish second. North Wilkesboro winning the Open and actually putting on a pretty good run in the All-Star race as a whole. This driver is very talented from the late model series. There's a reason why Dale Earnhardt Jr. wanted him to run full-time in his equipment. And he's showing it right now in the opportunities that he has had. So I think this would be a great add-on for Stewart-Haas Racing. They're in the rebuilding stage. You can obviously see it as Kevin Harvick's out the door. Eric Almirola will eventually be out the door, and they want some young guns. And even though Josh Berry will be probably the oldest driver in the bunch once Eric Almirola leaves, this is still a rookie in the Cup Series, but a lot of people are super excited about it. I don't know about you, Armani, but I would really like to see Josh Berry in that 4-car.
To me, Josh Berry is kind of like, if you're a Formula One fan, he's kind of like Nick DeVries in the sense of, if he does get that 4 ride, yeah, he will be a rookie, but you won't really give him the same expectations as a rookie because he's had so much experience under his belt, and on top of that, he's so much more older. And even the Xfinity Series, I mean, Berry hasn't won yet, but he has a stage win, and he has 9 top 10s and 11 starts to go along with 5 top 5. So obviously made it to the Final Four last year. He's done great as a substitute for Hendrick Motorsports this year. It would be a great pickup. And I mentioned this before. If Harvick leaves and Almirola is out, are you really going to trust Chase Briscoe to be the veteran driver, the veteran leader of the team? Because Ryan Preece saying it, he's run arguably worse than Cole Custer did last year. Briscoe's still really young, still very prone to mistakes. We saw that last year. So you have a guy like Berry who takes care of the equipment, doesn't really get into incidents, keeps everyone happy. I think this is a very smart move and a very good move because, I mean, hey, Berry's shown that, you know, he can compete around the top 10, top 15. I think this is a great move.
Yeah, this would be the time that I wish Johnny on the track was here because he is hands down the biggest Stewart-Haas Racing fan. He loves Eric Almirola. He loves Ryan Preece. So I bet he would have loved to talk about this, but unfortunately he did not come on. He's too good for us. So unfortunately, it is what it is.
He thinks
We're just kidding.
He's top dog.
If you're hearing it, Armani might mean it, but I do not. Because I am not.
No, don't put words in my mouth.
Hey, weren't you just saying something? You were just like, yeah, he's too good for us.
Yeah, he acts like he's too good for us.
See, acts like he's too good for us. There you go, right there. But I'm not saying that. I'm just hinting at it. Big difference. Very big difference. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Stewart-Haas Racing. They've been in a rough situation ever since 2021 came into effect. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to be the pathway for this team. I'm hoping it goes into the right direction and not a direction like what happened with Roush Racing after multiple drivers left their organization. So we shall see on that. But those were the biggest news stories to cover on here this week. Very important news. I mean, the most positive one definitely being Alex Bowman, but you can also give a green light also to Josh Berry going with Kevin Harvick, or taking over for Kevin Harvick at Stewart-Haas Racing, and then Project 91 coming in. So all around, good news in the NASCAR racing world. But now it is time to talk about the most important thing in today's episode, our top fantasy picks. And this is a huge one. This has 4 stages in it. we'll see how NASCAR Fantasy likes to predetermine how they're going to run the points, because I think last year they only did stage 1 and stage 2. They didn't count stage 3. They might change it up a little bit. Who knows? Either way, it's a crown jewel event, and you want to be dominant in a crown jewel event. And we feel like we got some great picks for you. So without further ado, here are our top fantasy picks for the Coca Cola 600. So you guys already know how it works. We go by fantasygames.nascar.com. You have 6 people in your lineup. 5 will count towards your final points, and you can only use one driver 10 times throughout the regular season. So it's very important on which drivers you want to rely on. Going into this race, it looks like the top manufacturers are still Chevrolet and Toyota. Ford is really struggling right now. People like Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, and Brad Keselowski are the top 3 representatives, and really, they haven't been much of contenders for victories, except for the Atlanta race where Joey Logano was able to get a victory. But other than that, they haven't really been there. We'll still try to find the top pick here for this weekend. And also another top Ford, Kevin Harvick. I do apologize for all the Harvick fans. He's actually having a decent season for the Ford situation. But we're going to try to include 1 from each manufacturer and then 2 extra. Armani, it's always the honor to give the guest the first pick. So who do you have as a top pick for this weekend and why?
So I talked about it, I recorded an episode of my podcast earlier today, and I mentioned how I think the top contenders, it's going to come down between 4 drivers. I think it's going to come down between Ross Chastain, Kyle Larson, William Byron, and Denny Hamlin. And out of those 4, I think Kyle Larson is going to be the most dominant one, simply just because I think he has the most speed out of all of them, the most consistent speed. It's just going to be a matter of, can he stay out of trouble? If he can stay out of trouble and he can keep it clean, I think the 5 is going to be really the easiest pick, especially because he won the race in dominating fashion 2 years ago, nearly won it last year. So I may be biased because I'm a Larson fan, but I'm going with the 5.
You know what? Well, first off, you picked 4 drivers, so now I'm in a big bind here, but it is what it is.
Well, technically, I picked 1. I said 4 to look at, I picked 1.
But you kind of foreshadowed who the other 3 drivers might potentially be. Just a heads up.
It's a foreshadow.
So since you picked, well, you talked about 4 drivers, I'm going to look specifically at the Ford camp, because this is the area that people are a little concerned about. And I think the one who's going to represent the Fords here for this weekend at Charlotte will be Kevin Harvick in the number 4. Now, Kevin Harvick here at the Coca Cola 600 has done really good in the past, as in the last 5 races here at Charlotte and during the springtime, he's been able to finish 10th or better, 2 of them being top 5 finishes. And the most recent Coca Cola 600, he was able to finish 3rd. Now, out of all the Fords, I really feel like lately, the past couple of weeks, the only one that's been really close to winning anything has been Kevin Harvick. The other Fords, yeah, they've been right there in the mix for top 10s, but Kevin Harvick has only been the real guy that's been close to grabbing a victory. And I feel like here in this weekend, since it's going to be his last Coca Cola 600, he's going to do everything he can to have himself a spectacular performance here in this crown jewel event. There's no way in hell Stewart-Haas Racing is going to give him a mediocre car this weekend. I think Kevin Harvick, he's going to be leading the Ford camp, and he should be considered a top pick if you want to lead towards more of the Fords. So, Armani, you pick a Chevrolet, I pick a Ford. Let's do a Toyota. Do you think it's going to be Denny Hamlin as the top pick, or is there someone else that you're thinking about being the top pick for the Toyota camp?
I feel like you have to pick Hamlin just because he's won the most recent race at a mile and a half. But then again, if you want to include an intermediate style track like Darlington, you got to throw Truex on there. I feel like those 2 are really going to be neck and neck. I'm going to give the edge to the 11 simply just because I feel like he's just got a little extra pace than the 19, and also that most recent win at Kansas does play into it, but I think the 11 and the 19 are like neck and neck.
Yeah, they're kind of neck and neck. I agree with you on that one. But I would also give the advantage to Denny Hamlin, because we are talking about he won the most recent intermediate mile and a half track, but he also won the most recent Coca Cola 600. So much stuff happened in that race. And we forget that he qualified on the pole. He only led 15 laps, but he led the most important laps, the ones at the very end, to get the victory. So There seems to be still a lot of good momentum for that 11 team. I mean, definitely they're going to be running on high momentum thanks to that victory at that intermediate track at Kansas. But also his last few finishes here have been really, really good. A lot of top 5 finishes in the past few years at the oval part of Charlotte. I have to specify that because we also run on the Roval. So it would not be a bad idea to be a Denny Hamlin fan this weekend and see him run solid here in this race. So we got 3 drivers. We can include 2 more here as top picks. I like your pick with the number 1 car, but I want to lean more towards William Byron at the moment just for the simple fact that he's still running on an absolute high. Everyone was wondering, oh, he's going to be dropping here soon. Oh, he's going to be dropping here soon. Well, except for the All-Star race where he didn't really do anything. That team is still on full momentum. Remember Kansas, he went 3 laps down at one point. He still came back and finished inside the top 5. That's a spectacular feat. You don't hardly see that anymore. So the team was really proud with that. They still have a great program here for these 1.5 mile racetracks. He's done good here in the past. Unfortunately, the finishes may not show it, because he's ran into some bad luck here and there. But when he's able to keep his car clean and avoid trouble, he's running inside the top 5, the top 10, and that's pretty impressive, especially when he was struggling really bad in his early points with Hendrick Motorsports. Now he's not. He's one of the top guys. You can't say he is the top guy because I still think that belongs to Kyle Larson at the moment, even though William Byron has 3 wins. I think William Byron is still going to have himself a great weekend. He's not slowing down on any momentum. The team is running really well and will be the biggest contender against these other drivers that we've talked about. Do you like that pick, or is there one other person that you feel like will be a better top pick than Byron?
I gotta go with Byron. Byron's just, he's faster than Chastain. He's won over Chastain. Chastain still has a lot of enemies on the track. And I mean, we saw at Darlington when everything hits the fan, Byron's able to capitalize. So, I mean, he has 3 wins on the season for a reason.
Yeah. And even when we think about those 3 wins, they've been in do or die situations. Hey, Las Vegas, you got to have the fast pit time. All right, boom, they're able to do it. Phoenix, hey, we got to do a pit strategy here to get in front. All right, boom, they did it. Darlington, just avoid the accidents. All right, they did it once again. So when it's do or die time, they have been able to perform, and that's very important. One more spot. Do we give it to Ross Chastain, or are you feeling like it should be a different driver? Because Ross Chastain did really good here last year. He's still showing great results at 1.5 mile tracks, whereas most recent run here in the Coca Cola 600, he led 153 laps. Is that the driver to go with as a top pick, or do you have another one in mind?
I feel like you have to pick Chastain. I mean, yeah, he's got a lot of enemies, but he's still one of the fastest drivers in the field. I mean, he's knocking on the door of a win. It's going to come eventually.
Yeah, it's so crazy. He is the points leader, still has not gotten a victory. And you look at the drivers who've already won, and not many of them show as much consistency as he has this season. The only ones I can think of have been Larson and Byron. Ross Chastain has been right there in that mix. He's been very close to getting victories, but again, he has been putting himself in rough situations. Will he put himself in a rough situation here again? I think the chances are very likely because it's 600 miles.
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard not to think. Oh, he's gonna run into somebody at this point because he's done it like 5 weeks in a row. I think the All-Star race was the only time, and it was an expedition race. So maybe he wasn't gonna drive 100% in that one since it didn't have many points that were involved. Actually, had 0.
Well, remember. Apparently, Justin Marks had a conversation with him, so they said it was a tough one. So. Who knows? Maybe it's finally getting to him.
Maybe. Who knows? Or maybe it will just last a week. You never know with Ross Chastain. The one thing you do know about Ross Chastain is he is still a phenomenal driver here in the Cup Series, still doing a great job, and he's got to be considered a top pick. So those are the top ones here for this weekend for the Coca Cola 600. We have the number 5 of Kyle Larson, the number 4 of Kevin Harvick, the number 11 of Denny Hamlin, the number 24 of William Byron, and the number 1 of Ross Chastain. Now we will move on to the mid-tier drivers, and it's kind of rude to say the mid-tier drivers because these guys are still really good picks to go with. We feel like they're going to be running around the top 10, have themselves a pretty good performance. We just don't think they're going to be running for the victory. That is the biggest key to separate these two out. And these guys, you're going to fill up the rest of your roster with them. Now, there's a big one I want to talk about here. I will start this off, and I say a really good driver to rely on here in the mid-tier area is going to be the number 8 of Kyle Busch. Although I don't think he's going to be at the same level as some of the other drivers we talked about, he still has had some great results here in the past. RCR has been a little wishy-washy when it comes to these mile-and-a-half tracks, but at the same time, they have shown speed. They've shown great results in the past, and if you want anybody to be behind the wheel of one of your cars in an endurance race, you want to be Kyle Busch. So, in my eyes, Kyle Busch is a really good driver to go with as your number 3, number 4 pick. Are you on the same Are you on the same side as me?
I like the idea of Kyle Busch being like kind of like a middle pick. I don't think he's going to be contention to necessarily win, just because I don't think RCR is consistent enough in terms of that on mile and a halves, but I think he will be around the top 10, probably flirting around with the top 5, assuming he doesn't speed on pit road. He should probably stay there.
All right. Sounds good. Yep. So Kyle Busch, he's a good pick. Do you have someone in mind that would be a really good top 10 contender, or maybe even try to sneak into the top 5 when it's all said and done?
Here's a top 5 contender, Bubba Wallace. That team has been really fast on mile and a halves, especially last year. I remember last year, like, he was running top 5 for most of the 600 before, I believe, one of those infamous pit road issues that he had last year. So, I mean, look, he's currently in the top 15 and top 16 in points. He's probably going to want to stay there. It seems like the team is going to finally start clicking. I really do think that 23 car, I'm not going to say they're going to be in contention, but in a weird way, I trust the 23 speed more than the 8 speed, but I trust the driver of the 8 more than the driver of the 23, so I'm going to kind of put them on the same pedestal.
Yeah, I did not think about Bubba Wallace. I was more leaning towards the number 45 of Tyler Reddick being a pretty good pick to go with, but I agree with you. Yeah, they've shown some great speed here at these mile and a halves. The 23:11, you can't say that they've struggled at these tracks because they haven't. Now, an interesting thing to talk about Bubba Wallace, I actually forgot to mention this. So Bubba Wallace has actually hit the main news for a lot of people because in his interview, it was caught him flipping off someone off camera, and people got pissed at this. I was so shocked to see how many people got upset with this situation. Do you know about this, Armani? I mean, you have to.
Yes, I do. I mean, people want to get mad at Bubba Wallace for every reason, just because. I'm not gonna get into it because if I get into it, it's gonna be I'll be at it all day. But let's just say sometimes some of the fans in NASCAR just disappoints you.
Yeah, I'll say this. If you're mad about this little incident right here, then be upset with Josh Berry when he threw the 2-gun salute on TV. Be upset with Chase Elliott when he flipped off Kyle Busch. And that's when everybody was watching on TV. I don't remember anyone really getting upset with that. Be upset with Noah Gragson anytime he's dropped the F-bomb when the camera goes by. You have to, I mean, I get it. Maybe get a fine at most, but there doesn't need to be any disciplinary action because it wasn't malicious. You could tell he was fooling around with somebody. It turned out it was one of his friends, and that's just what friends do. Should he have done it right then and there? No. But at the same time, I don't think he knew he was going to be on camera at that moment. They were probably waiting there for a few minutes before they started talking to each other. So he was caught off guard, and you could see it immediately. Once he does it, he's like, whoa, I better pay attention to this interview. So that's all we'll say on that. But yeah, going back, we kind of went off on a little bit tangent there. 23:11. Great option here for this weekend. They're showing the speed, and you definitely want to have at least one of them on there, whether that will be Bubba Wallace or Tyler Reddick. Keep in mind, Tyler Reddick has had 3 top 10 finishes here at the Charlotte Oval in 4 races, so that's pretty good. But Bubba Wallace has been kind of the faster car this year at intermediate, so just pick whoever. Yeah, I think you're going to be very, very happy with whoever you go with. Let's stay with the Toyotas. I want to include the number 20 of Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell he's also been super consistent here this year. Everyone keeps talking about Ross Chastain. Everyone keeps talking about Hendrick Motorsports and maybe even Denny Hamlin. But Christopher Bell, he's right there in the top 3 in points. So he actually has the most top 10 so far here going into 2023. And that's pretty impressive. especially not being like kind of the big driver that everyone's been talking about. And here in this race, I don't expect him to be running for the victory, but you want someone here in your third, fourth, or fifth spot to be consistently running inside the top 10. And Christopher Bell will do that for you. He did it last year. He qualified third. He was able to finish fifth. The years before, he did kind of struggle a little bit, but he's become one of the top drivers over there in the 20 cam. If you're not going to go with him, maybe Martin Truex Jr. I know Armani said Martin Truex Jr. is in that mix. So pick one or the other, similar with 2311. Armani, you like Martin Truex Jr. more than Christopher Bell, or do you think it's Christopher Bell? Either way, I still think they're both great picks.
They're both good picks. I'm going to lean towards Truex, especially just because more recently he's shown more race winning speed. Obviously won at Dover. Probably should have won Darlington, and he was in contention at Kansas. So I'm going to give it to Truex. I think he's just been consistently faster than the 20, especially recently.
All right. So let's do something here. We got 4 drivers in the Toyota camp. I don't want to get rid of Kyle Busch because I still feel like there's one more driver we have to talk about here in the mid-tier category. And I feel like when I say it, Armani's going to be like, oh yeah, of course, I forgot about him. But let's eliminate one driver here. Out of these 4 in the Toyota camp, who do you trust the least? Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, or Martin Truex Jr.? I know you like Bubba Wallace a lot, but due to his past finishes here, I'd say he's the weakest link. Who do you think? And we'll go with your answer.
Between Bubba or Reddick, I mean, consistency-wise, you want to go with Reddick, and I guess because we're considering this as the mid-tier guy. You see, Bubba gives me very boomer bust vibes. He's either going to run top 5 or it's going to be a problem. Reddick, I think, is going to be slower, but he's going to be consistently around that 7th to 8th spot. So considering this is like the mid-tier range, sense of you're just aiming for a top 10, I'm going to go with Reddick.
All right, Reddick, Bell, and Truex. I feel bad because you gave us some really good points with Bubba, and then I'm just like, all right, take him off your list. He's not worth a spot here. But guys, we're not saying that at all. We're saying that the Toyota camp is showing a lot of consistency. So if you want to throw maybe even 5 of them on there, I could see actually a really good run for the Toyotas. But I do want to include this one driver because I feel like this driver is definitely going to be running inside the top 10. He's definitely going to be able to get you some stage points. The number 9, Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott has to be, at the very least, a mid-tier pick. And the only reason we're saying that is because he hasn't shown us any signs that he is the guy to beat. He hasn't really shown that since he's gotten back, but still showing consistency. And if there's a track that he is super consistent at, or a particular race, it has been the Coca Cola 600. This is a track that he's been doing everything he can, or Crown Jewel event, to get the victory. He's been so close so many times, and I know he's going to go into this race demanding everything. He's going to put 110% into this race, and it's so hard to overlook him when you have people like Kyle Larson, William Byron on your list. And with him having a second place finish, and a fourth place finish in the last 3 out of the 4 races, I would include his 2022 race where he led 86 laps, but he got caught up in an early incident, so I don't really want to count that. But look at those other races, running around inside the top 5. If he does not get caught up in that accident in 2022, he's running around that top 5. I really think he's a number 3 pick on your fantasy roster, more than a 4 or 5. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say I agree with you on that one. I think Chase Elliott is a really good pick. I feel like people are kind of forgetting about him this year just because he's been so quiet since he's come back, but he had that 3rd place run at Darlington, so I think Chase Elliott could be... we talked about earlier where I think this could be the race where I think Chase Elliott finally starts to show that race-winning pace again.
Yeah, and if he does, it's awesome, because what a great time. Because look at the races that are coming up. You got Sonoma. You know he does good at Sonoma. We've seen him run really well there. You got some road courses coming in. You also have some good shorter racetracks like Gateway Technology. Kind of shaped a little bit similar to Darlington, but of course you can't really compare anything to Darlington. The reason why I bring that up, though, is it's similar to a racetrack like Dover, shorter racetracks. He did really good in that one as well. I feel confident that the summer stretch is going to be good for Chase Elliott, and he does need to get a victory. So he has to start performing now. And I honestly believe if you pick him here this weekend, you are not going to be disappointed with that number 9 team. So those are the drivers in the mid-tier, pretty good category on who you want to put to fill up the rest of your fantasy roster. We have the number 8 of Kyle Busch, the number 45 of Tyler Reddick, the number 20 of Christopher Bell, the number 19 of Martin Truex Jr., and the number 9 of Chase Elliott. Now it is time for the more fun segment here on these fantasy picks, the drivers to take a gamble on here this weekend. These are drivers we don't always rely on every single race, but they could be sneaky dark horses and ones that could save some of your other picks for later races. And there's a few good ones on here. Armani and I were talking before we decided to start recording the podcast, and we had quite a few drivers. We threw out a bunch of names here. So it's going to kind of be really hard to reduce it down to just 5 drivers. But we feel like we got a good mix of drivers, and hell, we might even change midway through. I don't know what's going on in his mind. I don't even know what's going on in my mind right now. So let's see who we want to go with here as far as drivers to take a gamble on. Do you want to start off, or would you like me to pick one?
Start off, I'll go with my first driver, and driver we haven't really talked about him too much, especially in the mid-tier. Probably because he's a Ford guy, but I'm going to disagree with you, even though Harvick is higher than him in points. I'd say Brad Keselowski, I can see him winning before Kevin Harvick. I think he's been consistently the faster Ford driver. He's been around in the top 10 in almost every mile and a half, been near the top 5 in almost every mile and a half all season long. I believe even Kansas, he finished top 10 or top 5, I believe. So Keselowski as a gamble, I think is great value.
It could be a really, really good value. I mean, when he has good equipment, he finishes way up inside the top 10, and he got a victory back in 2020 in the Coca Cola 600. Now, granted, that was with Penske Racing. Obviously, now he's with RFK Racing, different program entirely, and he struggled. He definitely struggled in the first Coca Cola 600 with his brand new team. But when he has good equipment like he does this year, tends to do really good here in this race. What about his teammate, though? What about Chris Buescher? I think Chris Buescher's another one that a lot of people have to keep their eyes on. Again, struggled last year, but he had a better average running position. Actually, his finish does not fit how he was running in that race. He was running around inside the top 15, which I know is maybe not the best pick for fantasy, but that was during a time when the team was struggling. Look at beforehand. How about an 8th place finish in 2021, a 10th place finish in 2020, a 6th place finish in 2019? He's shown some good results here in the past, a few top 10 finishes. So RFK Racing, you definitely don't want to shy away from them. And if you want to go with one or the other, or go with both, I don't think they're going to be top picks, but they're going to be really good, reliable 5th and garage picks. If you want to save Kyle Larson or William Byron or Denny Hamlin because you think it's going to be a chaotic race like it was last year, and there's a very good chance of that happening, these guys would be good drivers to substitute them in, because I don't think we're using Chris Buescher nearly as much as these other drivers we talked about. And I think Brad Keselowski, we're going to probably use him for all 10 races, but you kind of have to think really hard on what those 10 races are. So I like these 2 drivers here. Yes, they are Fords. They have been struggling, but they are notoriously known in the past. Notoriously known, I think that's a pretty interesting saying right there. It has been proven in the past that they run good and they finish inside the top 10 when it comes to this crown jewel event. As far as another driver to take a gamble on, I am going to have to include a Chevrolet here. And this Chevrolet has gotten a victory already here this year, but he's still a driver to take a gamble on. I'm talking about the number 47 of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. definitely impressed me in his run at Darlington. He really did. Now, granted, unfortunately, he got that speeding penalty. He kind of fell off there near the end. But that team is so much faster than what I've seen the last few years. And it's been very impressive. And here at the Coca Cola 600, he's gotten some great results. 7th place finish last year, 12th place finish in 2021, a 5th place finish in 2019, 2018, he was right there, right around the top 10, just some solid runs, an average running position right around 12th. Those are not bad times, and this is the strongest I've ever seen them. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is not being used that much here this year, but this race, I think you really want to rely on him. I think he's going to be one of those drivers. He almost reminds me of Michael McDowell last year. Like, you didn't think of Michael McDowell too much, but man, he sometimes snuck in there to get top 10s here and there. And I think that's right now what we got to see, the number 47 car. They're running on great momentum, and I think he's a good driver to take a gamble on. Do you agree with that, Armani?
I like that pick, especially because I'm looking at his stats. He's finished on the lead lap in 10 out of 13 races, average finish of 14th, 0 DNFs, and only finished outside the top 25 one time this year, and that was at Richmond. Ever since then, it's been a consistent streak of 15th or better, not including the All-Star race.
Yeah, and that's what you want here for drivers to take a gamble on. You want drivers to be able to run consistently inside the top 15, maybe even surprise you in a race here or there. And it could be a really good showing by this team. And hell, if he stays out of trouble like he has been this year, maybe even a top 10, maybe could even shoot for an 8th place finish. I could very well see that just by how this race has played it in the past. All right, Armani, 2 more drivers to go with. I'll give you one, and then I'll pick the last one. Who do you have and why?
I'll go with Chase Briscoe. I'll go with another Ford guy. He was really fast at the Coca Cola 600 last year, was in contention, spun himself out when battling Kyle Larson for the lead at the end of the race. Yes, Stewart-Haas Racing has struggled mightily, but, I mean, Briscoe, he's shown flashes. I believe it was 4 straight top 10s or 3 straight top 5s, so the team has shown that they can be fast. The problem is they just unload like with Rick Ware level speed. So if they can unload and have some decent speed, I think they're going to be in contention possibly for a top 10.
You know what? It's funny how I started these fantasy picks with Fords are struggling, and we have 4 Fords already in the mix, like at the same percentage. But like you said, Chase Briscoe last year did really, really good here in this race. Now, I would say that Chase Briscoe probably was running better last year than he is this year. I don't think that's much of a debate, especially how well he ran at the beginning of the season. It was very spectacular on what he was able to do in that Phoenix race last year, be able to get that victory. I don't think many people saw that one coming. This year, not quite the same, but improvements have been made. He's starting to feel more comfortable in that 14 car. And you know what? If you think Kevin Harvick's going to do really good in this race, then one of the Stewart-Haas Racing cars are going to be right there in the mix. They are similar to Hendrick Motorsports, where if one car's doing good, another car will be right there. Who that's going to be, I don't know. But right now, we're mostly leaning towards Chase Briscoe as a great dark horse to go with. Now, I have the last one, and there's a few drivers to really talk about here. Now, some people would say Austin Dillon. Now, and I know we talked about this, we hinted this, like, you know, maybe Austin Dillon will actually be a good pick. But I don't know, something just worries me about him this year. I feel like it's just been a really, really bad year for that 3 team, and they've just been underperforming like crazy in my eyes. So I don't know if I really want to go with them here in this race. I am going to go with the pick that you are going to be pissed at me for, because you told me no, absolutely not. Why don't we have some fun with this last pick and say the number 84 of Jimmy Johnson? Now, this could go one of 2 ways. It's either going to be really good or it's going to be atrocious. And there's going to be nothing in between. You're either going to feel like a winner or you're going to hate me for the rest of your life. That's how it is to look with Jimmy Johnson. But it's so hard for me to believe the fact that no matter how much Jimmy Johnson struggled this year, no matter how much Legacy Motor Club has struggled, just to see Jimmy Johnson struggle in the Coca Cola 600, I just don't see it happening. I really don't. I mean, look at 2020, his last Coca Cola 600. He finished 40th. But that was because I guess the car did not pass inspection, and it was like something that was like really, really minor, but it was enough to get them penalized. His average running position was 7th, and he was able to finish 2nd in that race. And in the past, runs consistently around the top 10. I'm trying to convince Armani. He's not leaning on my side at all. But I feel like if there's going to be one race where Jimmy Johnson could get a good send-off, it could be the 2023 Coca Cola 600. Now, Armani, tell me how dumb I am, and who would you have went with instead?
Do you want me to name off drivers I would pick before I pick Jimmy?
Sure, why not?
We'll go around that gamble category. Austin Dillon, Austin Cindric, Michael McDowell, Todd Gilliland. Legacy Motor Club is garbage. Jimmy, as a Jimmy fan, has been garbage his last couple years at Cup. He probably has the least amount of next gen experience out of anyone in the field.
I don't know, man.
I love Jimmy, but no, just no.
Well, I can't believe you're going to say Todd Gilliland when he's driving the number 51 car, even though I like Todd
I
Gilliland.
keep forgetting he's driving the 51. I keep thinking he's in the 38.
No, unfortunately not. That is Zane Smith driving that 38 car.
We'll take him out.
Okay, we'll put him in. All right. But I don't know. This Jimmy Johnson, even when he was struggling, even when he was at his worst, he still did good in the Coca Cola 600. And you cannot deny that. You cannot deny that. Top 10 finishes. No matter how many bad seasons he had, he still got top 10 in the Coca Cola 600. Should I be crazy and even include him as my one and only pick for a league that we go in, where you can only pick one driver throughout the entire season one time? Should I use him for that race? If I feel confident to put him in the take a gamble, should I do that?
You would have to smoke weed, crack, meth, everything to pick Jimmy there.
What does my drug habits have to do with this situation? Yeah,
the same as my alcohol habits.
I thought I also had the alcohol habit way worse than you did. We're giving this group a bad image. All right, let's move on. So, okay, just give me one driver. What was head and shoulders above the drivers for you to take a gamble? Would you say Austin Dillon?
I'd say Austin Dillon.
Okay.
He won this race a couple years ago. Granted, it was on fuel mileage, but you have to put yourself in position to even have a shot at the win. Nearly won the race last year as well in the closing stages, so he needs something to go right, and I think this could be the race to do it.
All right. So, okay, let's have a little fun here. So, here's the four drivers that we agreed on to take a gamble on. You got the number 6 of Brad Keselowski, the number 17 of Chris Buescher, the number 47 Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and the number 14 of Chase Briscoe. Now, if you like me, or let's not do it that way. Let's not do it that way. That's not fair. If you think I'm the smarter one in fantasy picks, go with Jimmy Johnson. If you think Armani's the smarter one in fantasy picks, go with Austin Dillon. Now, with our picks in Johnny on the Tracks little fantasy thing where you can only pick one driver each, I think we're only separated by 10 points. But with that said, he does have the 10-point advantage. So, pick your poison, guys. Either way, you're taking the gamble. And then lastly, let's wrap it up with the featured matchups. 4 featured matchups. These are actually very important because if you get these right, that's 10 extra points. And this is the difference maker. It really is the difference maker. Back then, it used to be the take a gamble category. I'd say this actually shows more potential. Now, I don't know if you've seen these featured matchups, but they are tough ones. They are definitely tough ones. The first one we have here is a number 11 of Denny Hamlin going up against the number 5 of Kyle Larson. Now, we had them both as top picks. I feel like you want to lead towards more Kyle Larson, but remember the last intermediate track, it was Denny Hamlin that edged him out. Who do we go with here, man?
I'd say Larson consistently, he has more speed. I think with that All-Star race win, it's going to kind of help that team right the ship. So I'm going to go with Kyle Larson over Denny Hamlin.
I think I'm with you on that one. Even though it was a really, really bad race for Kyle Larson, in the end, he was still able to get a top 10 after everything that happened. Denny Hamlin did get the victory, but right now, that 5 team has been consistent for contending for the win for almost every single race. So it's really hard to exclude him out of this or not pick him in this featured matchup. So I think we're both in agreement. We're going with Kyle Larson. Next matchup we have here is the number 9 of Chase Elliott going up against the number 4 of Kevin Harvick. Again, drivers that we had in the pretty good category. Actually, we put Kevin Harvick as a top pick as he was the top representative for the Fords. But does that mean he's going to do better than Chase Elliott? It's going to be really close. Both these guys are top 10 contenders. Who are we going with? Now, for me, I want to say Chase Elliott, just based on how he's done really well here in the past. And if I feel like the other Hendrick cars are going to be doing just as good, I think he's going to be right there in that mix. Armani, do you think it's going to be more Kevin Harvick just due to his consistency as well? Or are you with me on Chase Elliott?
I'm going to take the gamble on Chase Elliott. I think this race he is going to have this is going to be a bounce back race for him. So I think that with that, he's in a better car. Yeah, Harvick has been more consistent, but think this is going to be the race where we see Chase compete for the win.
All right, fair enough. So we got Kyle Larson over Denny Hamlin. We got Chase Elliott over Kevin Harvick. This third one might be a little bit easier, but it still could show some challenges. It just depends on how one of these drivers race. As we talked about it could be going one way, could be going another way. That is Martin Truex Jr. going up against the number 23 of Bubba Wallace. Now, I think, based on what we've seen, I think Martin Truex Jr. is the better driver right now to go with here. Now, if practice and qualifying shows us something completely different, then maybe you go with Bubba Wallace. But Bubba Wallace has a high ceiling and a high floor compared to Martin Truex Jr. in my personal opinion. So I like Martin Truex Jr. But Armani, do you see a world where Bubba Wallace is able to finish better than Truex?
I think I got Truex over Bubba. I think Truex. They both have I both think they're gonna have fast cars. I think Truex is gonna be a little bit faster than Bubba, so I got Truex over Bubba Wallace.
All right, so 3 featured matchups. We're both in agreement here. This is going pretty good. I'm liking this. Now, this is the matchup that I wish Dalton was here because we got Kyle Busch against William Byron.
You and Dalton. Here we go.
Now, that would have been a lot of fun if he was on here. I think we would have really enjoyed that one, but it is what it is. This one is actually a really fun one because William Byron has 3 victories. Kyle Busch has 2 victories here this year. William Byron has been the most consistent one running up front. Kyle Busch has been the most consistent one here at the Coca Cola 600. Now, we put Kyle Busch in the pretty good category. We gave William Byron the top pick. I don't know. Now, for me, you don't have to listen to me. I'm picking William Byron. And that's just going to be the way it is because I'm going to be biased towards William Byron. So don't listen to me. Just fully listen to Armani on this one. Armani, based on these 2, you don't have a biased opinion on this one at all. Who are you going with?
I'm going William Byron. I mean, we mentioned it earlier. We think he's going to be in contention to win. Kyle Busch, we think he'll be in contention more for like a top 10. So just off that alone, you got to go with the 24.
Yes! I'm so proud of you. You picked well. And I think I'm about to get a tweet from Dalton saying, "How dare you?" This is not even posted yet, and I already feel that one coming. So those are our 4 featured matchups here. We were pretty much in agreement. Hopefully that is the case. I mean, it's going to be a crazy endurance race, so you never know. But for our featured matchups, we got Kyle Larson over Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott over Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr. over Bubba Wallace, and William Byron over Kyle Busch. And that will conclude our fantasy picks for today's episode. A little bit all over the place. I'm not going to lie. I was really trying my best to just think as hard as I could. Like, oh man, what do I want to say here? What do I want to pick? And I stumbled over some words, but in the end we survived. And Armani, he was actually the professional here. He actually talked in complete sentences, unlike me. He didn't skip over his words at all. So Armani, well done. And thank you as always for joining the podcast. Where can we find you?
Well, as an announcer and now assistant sports information director at my school, I'd hope I'd be able to formulate sentences, or else I probably wouldn't have a job.
But that is very true. I didn't even think about that.
So you could follow me on my socials, Twitter and TikTok at Motor Minister. If you want to support me even more, listen to the Motorsport Ministry on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. You want to support me even further, download the HBCU League Pass Plus app. Football, soccer, basketball season, all's around the corner, just a couple months away, so you can catch me broadcasting, commentating on those as well. And for another plug...
Nice.
For one more plug, my best friend just launched his new clothing brand, Ripped Wear, for it's an athletic clothing brand. They make awesome merch, so I want to give his brand a shout out as well.
Can you say that one more time? It almost sounded like you said Rick Rare.
Not Rick Wear, Ripped Wear, like you ripped it.
R.I.P. Wear. That's all you got to remember. So,
well, R.I.P.P.E.D.
R.I.P.P.E.D. Okay, never mind. I was this is why we don't have sponsorship on this podcast. I just butcher them. But thank goodness we have Armani here. So for me, if you want to find me anywhere, course, just look up my social media pages on TikTok, Twitter, as well as YouTube. Just look up Vanilla Wafers. I will pop up. YouTube, my next documentary type video or narrative type video that I'm going to be doing, is going to involve a driver that raced in the Busch Series, but threw it all away due to some bad drug tests. And he was one of the dirtiest drivers I ever saw, but his story is definitely a fun one. I'm going to be talking about the story of Shane Mill. Mari, do you know who Shane Mill is?
I remember watching a video of him. Like, I think it was like he had talent, he just never honed it.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, everyone's talking about Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Ross Chastain being some of the dirtiest drivers in the game. Just watch this video, and you're going to see how crazy Shane Mill was. Lots of talent, but absolutely crazy. On TikTok, I'm always posting NASCAR trivia and some fun videos on there, as well as card unboxings. We're getting ready to go through another deck of cards. I feel like I've had a lot archived, so you're going to see a little bit of change of scenery, but I'm probably going to be as angry as always, you know, trying to find that Mario Andretti. And then on Twitter, if you want to talk to me during race day, just reach out to me there. I've had a few people been talking to me there, and I greatly do appreciate you guys asking me those questions or giving me your opinions. It's always great to talk to the fans. And one last thing, I will be at Sonoma Raceway here in a couple weeks. I'll keep bringing that up just to let you guys know. And yes, I will be bringing that big-ass hat that you've been seeing on TikTok. So that way you guys do not miss me. So that will be a lot of fun to go meet you guys there at Sonoma. But that will conclude today's episode, guys. I have been your host, Vanilla Wafers, and we have been able to take you to the front of the field. So why don't we grab that checkered flag, do some burnouts, and head on out. So you all take care. This has been the Fantasy Filler Podcast.